Before we start the video, please don't be a Baka and subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell. I will assure you your little effort will help me a lot. Now back to the video. In a dungeon, a team of crystal moss collectors were making their way through the lingering magical energy, searching for crystal moss. The workday was drawing to a close, and Kang Hyunmoo, the protagonist of this manhwa, had yet to meet his quota. As he made his way through the lingering magical energy, he spotted a piece of crystal moss that was large enough to fulfill his daily quota. He began to climb up the wall to collect the crystal moss, however, he slipped and fell into the lingering magical water. A college research assistant quickly approached Hyunmoo and asked if he was okay. Hyunmoo checked his suit for any contaminated water that may have touched his skin. He told her he was fine, but Min was still worried and asked him not to push himself too hard. The other workers agreed with Min and reminded Hyunmoo that the water had been contaminated by mana from the crystal moss. For normal people like them, one mistake could mean death. Therefore, he shouldn't be trying to push himself. Hyunmoo was reminded of how unfair life was when he couldn't fill his daily quota after work. He was only paid $30. 30 years ago, when dungeons started to appear, regular citizens started awakening the power to challenge these dungeons. Unfortunately, Hyunmoo was a zero-star powerless person with no chance of awakening ability. Robert Lee, a lawyer, entered the changing room while Hyunmoo was thinking about how he was going to get through the day with $30. Hyunmoo was confused because he had never met his parents. He was a bottom feeder with no chance at life. The lawyer handed him a necklace and said he was told to give it to him. Hyunmoo stored the necklace away and quickly finished changing. At a bus stop, Hyunmoo showed Min the necklace, and she told him that the necklace was a return stone, an item hunters used to escape dungeons. If you want to read this manhwa, you can read it on the sponsor of this video, the mangaexpert.com website. The link will be in the description. Feel free to check it out. Now let's resume the video. She had heard a rumor that a return stone could only be used inside a dungeon, so she wondered why his dead father left him a return stone when Hyunmoo was a zero-star. Those words hurt Hyunmoo, and she quickly tried to apologize, but the damage was already done. Trying to shift the conversation, she asked him if he heard about Lee Jit. At that moment, the bus arrived, and Hyunmoo told her that he didn't care about Lee and boarded the bus. Later, at his house, Hyunmoo watched a broadcast that covered Lee Jit and his guild clearing a 5-star dungeon. In the entire world, Lee and his guild were the third to clear a 5-star dungeon. Hyunmoo compared his life to Lee's. Lee was wealthy, muscular, famous, and handsome. On the other hand, all he had was a return stone his father left behind for him. He wasn't complaining about his situation in life, he just wished he had a chance like Lee so he could make use of it. He clenched his fist, holding the return stone in his hand and activating it. Suddenly, he was teleported to an unfamiliar place and bombarded with various prompts that made no sense to him. One of the prompts that read, "You are the last survivor," caught his attention, and he wondered what it could mean. He started calling out to see if anyone was there, but there was no response. He continued calling out and noticed a giant vein of crystal moss. The one he failed to collect earlier would have been worth a few $100s, but this vein should be worth a few thousand, maybe even tens of thousands. Suddenly, he was hit with a poison status and became paralyzed. He couldn't breathe, and his stamina was being drained continuously. The system informed him that he was being attacked by an enemy, but when he looked around, there was nothing near him. In the end, he died from the most dangerous enemy, fine dust. He was revived and prompted with a quest called First Night in Hell, with the objective of surviving until morning. He quickly grabbed his jacket and ran off. He didn't know if someone was putting him through this, but if he finds them, he will be sure to have his revenge. After running around aimlessly for 5 minutes, Hyunmoo died. On his 8th death, Hyunmoo came up with his first plan, which was to pray and ask God for forgiveness. But after 11 minutes, he died again. On his 11th death, his poison and paralysis resistance increased, and he came up with his second plan, breathing in all of the fine dust that was killing him. As you probably guessed, the plan didn't work, and he died again. On his 14th run, his resistance increased again, and he realized that he survived the longest when he was just breathing instead of panicking. He started using a breathing technique he learned when he was a kid. He died again, but this time he survived longer and even leveled up. He continued with the breathing technique, and on his 28th death, his body felt light. Due to the fact that the poison in his body had reached a critical point, he learned the rare skill Poison Blood and would no longer suffer damage from poison. However, Hyunmoo couldn't believe it and turned his attention to the crystal moss instead. There was crystal moss everywhere. He picked one up, wishing they were real so he could sell it. Suddenly, the system asked him if he wanted to store the crystal moss. He wasn't sure what was going to happen but replied yes, and the crystal moss disappeared. He quickly checked his inventory and learned that the crystal moss was real. Even though he was in hell, unlocking cool abilities made him happy. All this while, he was hearing a sound that had been bothering him. He turned around to look for the source and noticed a horde of mosquitoes making their way to his location. He tried running away, but the horde quickly caught up to him and started drinking his blood. He died again, but because the mosquitoes drank his blood, they also died. After reviving, he leveled up, and because his poison blood killed over 100 mosquitoes at once, he obtained a new normal achievement, and the power of his poison blood increased. However, he also contracted an abnormal disease from the mosquitoes and began slowly losing health. He stood up, protesting against the system, but because of the disease, he stumbled and crashed into a chair. He learned the dismantling skill but didn't notice his health had dropped below 10%. He started regenerating with his last man standing title. He stood up, looking at the notifications he received, finally realizing that he got the dismantling skill by breaking one of the chair legs. He picked up the chair and activated the dismantling skill, splitting the chair into different parts. He organized the different parts on the ground and tried to create something to see if he could get another skill. It worked, and he got the normal skill creation. He didn't know how long he was going to be stuck in hell or what scary monsters he might come across, but he knew that if he wanted to live, he needed to make a shelter. He starts looking around for things he could use. He found more crystal moss and stored it. He continued looking and found a newspaper. He picked it up and tried reading the headline, but he was struggling. Suddenly, he obtained another skill, and with the language skill, he could read the newspaper. The newspaper further confirmed that this hell he was in was somehow connected to the real world. But even if the two worlds were connected, there was nothing he could do about it. So, first, he wanted to see what he could do with the mosquito corpses. After dismantling all the mosquito corpses, he was exhausted. He obtained mosquito stingers, mosquito wings, and hell mosquito blood. He used the creation skill and created a hell dart. It was a rare item, and the fact that he kept getting rare things concerned him. He created more hell darts and used his creation skill on the rest of the materials he had. The legendary class item Unknown Egg was created, and his creation abilities increased greatly. There was a 50% chance that the egg would be alive or dead, and he could keep it alive by meeting certain requirements. He held the egg close to his chest, trying to give it warmth, but stopped after getting embarrassed. Suddenly, he heard the sound of something breaking the door down. He hid, and a goblin made its way through the door. The goblin noticed Hyunmoo hiding in the corner and lunged at him. He dodged the attack and started heading up the stairs. The goblin chased after him. He pulled out the club he made with the creation skill from his inventory and attacked the goblin. The goblin dodged and launched a series of counterattacks, breaking Hyunmoo's makeshift club in the process. The goblin smiled and started speaking in its native tongue. Hyunmoo was taken aback. He didn't know what the monster was saying, but it was definitely speaking. The goblin saw that Hyunmoo was distracted and struck him with his sword down his chest. At that moment, Hyunmoo took some hell darts out of his inventory and threw them at the goblin. One of the darts landed on the goblin's hand, and it became poisoned. Without hesitation, the goblin lifted his sword and cut his own arm off. Hyunmoo became distracted again, and he concluded that the reason the dark poisoned the goblin's arm was because of his poison blood skill. When he focused on the battle, the goblin was gone. He realized that the goblin had jumped in the air and moved to his blind spot, but it was too late. The goblin managed to strike him down. The goblin started walking away, surprised that there were still Hyunwoo's left. As the goblin walked off, Hyunwoo could be seen smiling, almost like he enjoyed getting struck down. His health fell below 10, and he started regenerating due to the perks of the Last Man Standing title superscript 3. The title saved him, and he was able to complete the first night in Hell quest. He was rewarded with 1 silver box, and his compensation for the difficulty of the mission. The silver box became a golden box. He could also use the return stone now, which is a consumable item that warps its user to a nearby town. He had 14 days until he was assigned a new quest. Hyunwoo quickly reached into his shirt, grabbing the return stone tightly, and when he opened his eyes, he was in the real world. He started celebrating and shouted, "I made it back alive." Suddenly, he ripped the return stone from his neck, damning his father for giving it to him. He was about to crush the return stone on the ground, however, he recalled all the abilities and materials he was able to gain in Hell and stopped, realizing that the return stone was his only way to move up as a bottom feeder. Min was walking by when she noticed him. She wasn't sure if it was Hyunwoo, so she called out to him. Hyunwoo turned around and saw Min. She quickly rushed to him and gave him a raincoat. She took him to her house and gave him a monocontamination remover just in case he was contaminated. Hyunwoo told her that he was fine, but she shouted at him for taking monocontamination lightly since it could mean his death. He took the monocontamination remover and went into the shower. After using the monocontamination remover, Hyunwoo stepped out of the shower and asked Min what day it was. She told him that it was the 11th of September. As he tried to make sense of what had happened to him, Min admired his body. She snapped out of it, telling herself to get a grip. Then she told Hyunwoo that she was going out to buy him new clothes. He only wanted to use his old clothes, but she refused since they were contaminated and torn. After she left, Hyunwoo opened his inventory to check on his reward for completing the quest. He opened the golden chest, and the quality of the reward was increased due to the effect of his title, SSS rank Good Luck. He obtained the legendary skill card Battle Helper. Hyunwoo held the skill card in disbelief. It's usually very difficult to get a skill, and even a rare skill could get you special treatment. He was sure that in the entire world, only 7 people had a legendary skill, meaning he had become the 8th. However, there wasn't a single explanation of what the skill does. So, he started throwing punches, hoping the skill would activate. When Min returned from the store, she caught Hyunwoo punching the air, embarrassing him. She handed him the clothes she bought, and after he changed into them, she brought up the fact that he was fine after being exposed to mana. She asked him if he had any powers. Hyunwoo told her that he had recently awakened his powers, so he didn't have full control over them. He recalled that Min was researching something, and he asked her if it was crystal moss she was researching. She told him that it was, and he pulled out crystal moss from his inventory and showed it to Min. Min grabbed his hand in disbelief, asking him where on earth he got it. She asked him who asked her if where he got it was important and told him that the crystal moss was very pure and that its energy level was close to 5 stars. Getting more would be valuable for her research. Hyunwoo told Min that he had no plans of giving her the crystal moss unless she helped him find a way to sell it. However, selling crystal moss of that size and purity would be difficult without documentation proving you were a hunter. Since the size of the crystal moss was a problem, he broke it in 2. Min started hitting and cursing him. Hyunwoo told her that he had more crystal moss and asked if she could sell the one he just broke. She told him that she could, and he gave her 2 conditions. 1, she couldn't tell anyone where the crystal moss came from, and 2, no one could know he was the one selling it. Then Hyunwoo got angry at the fact that those were his only conditions when he just wasted a crystal moss of that purity. He apologized and grabbed his torn clothes, getting ready to leave, but Min asked him to sleep over. The next morning, Min had a glow to her, but Hyunmoo looked drained. She told him that she was leaving to meet up with the buyer and left. 1 week later, Hyunmoo tagged along with Min to meet the buyer. Although he was the one who asked her to sow the crystal moss, there are a lot of guys who are on the verge of losing everything, and those kinds of people are saying they will buy the rest of the crystal moss at a premium price. Something was definitely off when they entered the cafe they agreed upon. Hyunmoo noticed a big ominous fella, making him glad he tagged along. But to his surprise, Min grabbed his hand and brought him to an old man wearing a trench coat. The old man introduced himself as Park Wiso, and from his grip strength alone, Hyunmoo could tell he was strong. If he attacked them, the chances of him winning were low. Park then pulled out a bag of crystal moss for Park to inspect. After inspecting them, he asked Min if he needed to deposit the money in the same account. She told him that the account had not changed, and Park grabbed the bag and wished them goodbye, calling Hyunmoo by his full name. Hyunmoo was surprised and questioned the situation. The old man realized that Hyunmoo was behind the crystal moss and started teasing him for thinking that he was going to attack them. Min received a notification on her phone and showed it to Hyunmoo, asking him how it feels to make $1 million. Park reported that his deal was successful and that they obtained all of the crystal moss on the market while inside a car. Park shared his opinion with his boss about the person behind the crystal moss. He thinks that the person will be strong since he is selling crystal moss with purity that can only be found in 5-star dungeons. Park also reported that there was someone with Min, but he needed to observe him a little bit longer. The boss was intrigued by the idea that someone selling crystal moss of this purity got the boss wondering how strong they were. Park told him that they would at least be on the boss's level, intriguing the boss even more, and he asked Park to investigate Min and her partner. Park accepted the mission, revealing that his boss is Lee. Hyunmoo was doing some pull-ups in hell a few days later. After doing 150, he dropped down from the bar. His strength level cap increased, but Hyunmoo was disappointed in himself. Just that light workout burned him out. He would have been able to do more if he wasn't in hell. Laying there exhausted from the pull-ups, he questioned how long he had spent in hell. A prompt popped up, informing him that he had 18 hours and 15 minutes until he was assigned his next quest. Hyunmoo was getting used to hell after coming back and forth a few times. When he was in hell, time also passed in the real world, and the time left for the next quest moved the same as the real world. The only problem was that his location changed every time he returned from hell. He got the hang of everything else, but he just couldn't understand why his location had to change every time he returned from hell. He opened his status window and checked the skill he received earlier, Battle Helper. The skill optimized his accuracy by controlling his movements and also helped him make judgments by predicting the enemy's movements. If the skill were in a game, it would be an illegal cheat, something a hacker would use. Hitting a cheat skill like Battle Helper made him realize that he wouldn't be able to survive in hell without some cheat skills or plot armor. He approached a punching bag, and before he could even throw a punch, the skill Battle Helper activated. As he was throwing punches, something was weird. It felt like he was automatically focusing his punches on one area, and finally, after a few more punches, the punching bag was destroyed. With this, Hyunmoo finally understood the functions of the skill Battle Helper. He was then assigned the new quest, a beginner's friend, and his objective was to kill 5 beginner scarecrows. However, Hyunmoo got angry. He was already level 7, and the system decided to give him a beginner's quest now. On top of that, he didn't recall seeing any scarecrows during his time in hell. But he needed to increase his level fast, so he wore his clothes and moved out to find some scarecrows. He followed the crystal moss and found stairs leading down to a basement of a building that had been torn apart. He made his way down the stairs and found some creepy-looking robots. The appearance of the robots scared Hyunmoo, and he wondered why the creator of the robots couldn't have made them look nice. The system brought up the robots' information, and Hyunmoo learned that the robots were the scarecrows he was looking for. But he was shocked to see that there were question marks next to the scarecrows' levels. A shiver ran down Hyunmoo's spine at the thought of all the scarecrows suddenly coming to life. He picked up debris and hid behind it, then took out a hell dart from his inventory and threw it at one of the scarecrows. The scarecrow didn't move after getting hit with the hell dart, so Hyunmoo ran in, thinking it would be an easy win. He threw a punch, and to his surprise, even though he threw the punch with all of his might, it didn't feel like he hit anything. The scarecrow suddenly turned on, recognizing Hyunmoo as an opponent, and activated sparring level 1. Hyunmoo quickly realized that the scarecrows would adjust to match his level, and he protested to the system for not letting him know about the scarecrows beforehand. The scarecrows didn't care about his protest and attacked. Luckily, they were slower than the goblin that tried to kill him previously, so he was able to dodge. If you were level 7 in the real world, you would be treated like a bodyguard or a soldier with 5 years of experience. But in hell, he was being treated like a beginner. This angered him, and he activated the skill battle helper to deal with the scarecrows. However, he was quickly surrounded by the scarecrows. One of the scarecrows attacked Hyunmoo, who dodged but left an opening for another scarecrow to put Hyunmoo in a headlock. After struggling for a while, Hyunmoo managed to free himself and land a solid punch on the scarecrow's face. This triggered the scarecrows to activate sparring level 2. One of them immobilized Hyunmoo while the other proceeded to use him as a punching bag. Hyunmoo's body's solidity, hemorrhage resistance, and pain resistance increased as he was being used as a punching bag. The scarecrows left him with less than 10% of his health left, and he started regenerating thanks to the title Last Man Standing. Hyunmoo considered running away from the scarecrows, but his pride wouldn't allow him to run since he hadn't landed a single good hit on the scarecrows. Hyunmoo took out a heinous club that had been strengthened out of his inventory to turn the tides of the battle since the scarecrows were using martial arts. He rushed in and managed to break the hand of one of the scarecrows. Suddenly, the scarecrows also equipped their weapons, and the tide of the battle was no longer in Hyunmoo's favor. Hyunmoo died and returned back to the scarecrows and continued his fight. This time he didn't use the club and relied on his fists. He was able to tie up 4 scarecrows, and with the help of the skill battle helper, he could handle the scarecrows in a one-on-one situation. He pinned the scarecrow to the ground and attacked its chest continuously until its core was revealed. He was about to destroy the core but stopped after the scarecrow activated sparring level 3. He wanted the scarecrows to get stronger since the stronger they got, the stronger he would become later. Hyunmoo opened his eyes trying to recall how many times he died after the scarecrow activated sparring level 3. He couldn't believe it. Every time he died, the scarecrow was using a different martial art, and he questioned how many martial arts the scarecrows knew. The scarecrow approached him, this time taking a fistfight stance. Hyunmoo was excited by this because he didn't think he would die in a fistfight. He attacked the scarecrow first and was pushing it back. The scarecrow activated sparring level 4 and attacked Hyunmoo's eyes. Hyunmoo flew back, complaining about his eyes, but the scarecrow wasn't done. It proceeded to bite him. He died, and at the end of his 9th death, Hyunmoo realized 3 facts. First, the scarecrows couldn't increase the difficulty past sparring level 4, which is why he wasn't noticing any new patterns in the scarecrow's attacks. Second, the scarecrows had a fixed pattern of moving, and if there were any differences, then it would stop to correct its movements. Third, there's no need for him to destroy the scarecrows. If they take a certain amount of damage, they would stop moving. After realizing these 3 things, Hyunmoo was able to defeat all the scarecrows and complete the quest Friend of a Beginner. This made him feel good, and he fell to the ground due to exhaustion. All he wanted to do was fight monsters on the same level as him, but that's not the type of place hell is. He questioned why the quest was named Friend of a Beginner when the difficulty was not something a regular beginner could handle. As compared to learning something, it was more like hell was beating the fighting techniques into him. Hyunmoo stood up and decided to check his rewards for the quest before he returned to the real world. He opened the silver chest, and the quality of his reward was increased due to the effects of the title SSS rank Good Luck. He obtained what looked like a golden wrapping cloth. The wrapping cloth was the legendary item Celestial Cradle, and it accelerates growth and fully restores any damage in the body. Hyunmoo understood the part about the cradle restoring damage in the body, but he couldn't understand what the growth acceleration was about. He was happy that he got another legendary item, but he didn't know how to use it. He questioned if he wrapped the cradle around his head, if it would make him smarter. He wrapped the cradle around his head but quickly took it off because of embarrassment. He was glad that no one was around to see what he just did. He continued to observe the cradle, and he realized that when he died and was revived, he would be in perfect condition. Meaning the cloth wouldn't be useful to him. He decided to sell the cradle when he returned to the real world and opened his inventory to store it away. The egg he obtained when he was dismantling mosquitoes caught his attention. Because the cradle mentioned growth, he figured it might work on eggs. He took the egg out of his inventory and wrapped the cradle around it. After a while, nothing had happened, and he questioned if the cradle didn't work on eggs. He decided to stop waiting and just sell the cradle when he returned back to the real world. But suddenly, the eggs started hatching. Hyunmoo became concerned. He hadn't thought about what he would do if a monster that wanted to kill him came out of the egg, but it was too late. The egg had already hatched, and a fairy-looking monster came out. The monster was smaller than he had imagined. He reached out his finger to pet it, but the fairy suddenly grabbed his finger and bit him. In shock, he threw the fairy into the ceiling and complained to the system for giving him a monster that wanted to eat him as a reward. The fairy stood up and told him that she was hungry. Hyunmoo took out a piece of candy from his pocket and asked the fairy if she wanted to eat the candy instead. The fairy refused and pointed at Hyunmoo. Hyunmoo permitted the fairy to drink his blood. After a while, he became annoyed that the fairy was still drinking his blood and asked her to stop. She stopped and helped him stop the bleeding. Later, she complained that Hyunmoo's blood only tasted somewhat satisfying and asked him to bring out her dessert. This irritated Hyunmoo, and he grabbed her, asking her to repeat those words. Realizing that her life is in danger, the fairy thanked Hyunmoo for letting her drink his blood. Hyunmoo decided to let go of her and introduced himself. He asked her for her name, but she couldn't remember. The only thing she remembered is that she was supposed to appear at the end. This confused Hyunmoo, and he asked her if she was some kind of superhero that appeared in the end to save the world. She replied with a smile, "No, I promise to eat all living organisms when the world ends." This didn't make sense to Hyunmoo. This small fairy creature was saying it is going to devour all living organisms when the world ends. Suddenly, he remembered that his blood was poisonous. The poison was so potent that it melted a goblin's arm, but she was fine after drinking his poisonous blood. He couldn't use the skill Battle Helper to defeat her because she wasn't hostile to him. He didn't know what her skill level was, and it looked like he wouldn't be able to just leave her behind. His only other option was to take her as a pet. Since he decided to take her in as a pet, he gave her the name Renyan, which she accepted because it sounded similar to Agent of the Apocalypse and Pixie Tongue. Hyunmoo then asked her to promise to never eat a Hyunmoo. Renyan asked if that included him, and Hyunmoo replied that he didn't care about others, but she should never try to eat him. And in exchange for her promise, he would give her some blood. Renyan agreed to Hyunmoo's request and drank his blood again. She then asked him why the scarecrows were destroyed. Hyunmoo explained that they were destroyed for his victory, but he noticed something odd. One of the scarecrows had been ripped in two. He remembered the battle with the scarecrows and concluded that he wasn't the one who tore the scarecrow in two. Hyunmoo was notified of the addition of the Valiant energy trait to Battle Helper. He tested it out on a scarecrow and was surprised to find that he could destroy it with a single punch. Renyan saw what Hyunmoo had done and decided to try it out too. She replicated the move on another scarecrow, which activated the other scarecrows and caused them to surround Hyunmoo. The scarecrows recognized Hyunmoo as a super Hyunmoo and directed him to a corner of the room that was packed with debris. As he cleared the debris, Renyan could smell something delicious. Hyunmoo continued clearing the debris and came across a skeleton. Renyan took a bone from the skeleton and started eating it. Hyunmoo took the bone from her before she could finish it and placed it back where it was. There was also a letter that read, "It's been 3 years since the level rose to nightmare." The situation only worsened. Children who were born in the potent dust died. Hunters started dying out, hope faded away, and Hyunmoo went extinct. Hyunmoo was stunned. According to the letter and the message he saw when he entered Hell, the future of the real world and for high-ranking ability users to die out as well showed the dangerous monsters that were about to appear. Hyunmoo couldn't figure out who left the letter behind, and Renyan found a return stone among the belongings of the skeleton. She showed it to Hyunmoo, who observed it and noticed that it looked different from the one that brought him to Hell. Suddenly, the return stone started glowing brightly and disappeared after a while. Hyunmoo had a strange tattoo on his hand after that. A message appeared telling him that the stars were watching him, and a veil of darkness started surrounding Hyunmoo. He tried to get away, but it was too late. He found himself in a strange place with nothing around him. He started calling out for Renyan, but suddenly a message appeared informing him that advancing Starbarrow had recognized his absorption of the star fragment. However, after seeing Hyunmoo, the Starborrower became disappointed and forfeited the fragment before leaving. Hyunmoo gave the star the middle finger in anger and started hitting the message that had popped up. He accidentally lifted a lock, and the system explained that the owners of stars are beings who have absolute control over their own territory somewhere in space. These beings place their absolute power into fragments and lend them out. They do so in hopes that their kin will use this power to become rulers and expand their territory. Hyunmoo was in possession of one of these fragments. Because of this, the stars wished for him to become their kin. Hyunmoo realized that the return stone Renyan had found earlier was the fragment the system was talking about. After the explanation, all of the stars that wanted Hyunmoo to be their kin appeared. A prompt appeared asking Hyunmoo to choose the star he wanted to follow. However, he refused. Even if the system wanted him to choose, he wouldn't. Since he knew nothing about the stars, so one by one, the system introduced the stars to Hyunmoo. The Shattering Star Gull is an absolute ruler who laughs behind a political mastermind and rules over the masses with daggers, poison, and conspiracies while staying behind the scenes. The Waking Star Az is the father of all grief and melancholy and commands an army of the dead while enjoying watching despair after destruction. The Starved Star Yagulin is a snake of greed and desire, his citizens are in a constant state of starvation, and his wish is to swallow the world. The Whispering Star Monstrel instigates in light and deceives in darkness, she can deceive any powerful being. The Conquering Star Aaron is a loser who advances with fire and slaughters his enemies with steel. He wants to burn the world with meaningless hate and resentment and would be satisfied to rule over ashes. Hyunmoo became concerned that all of the stars sounded like they needed therapy. The system informed him that the stars become interested in those similar to them. Hyunmoo couldn't believe it. The system was basically saying he had the nature of a conspiracist with a personality disorder and is a greedy attention seeker who also has intermittent explosive disorder. Hyunmoo burst into a fit of rage, proving that the star's assessment of his personality was correct. But even if he was all those things, somehow, he thought he was better than the stars. He asked the stars what would change if he chose them, and one by one, the stars showed him glimpses of what they had to offer. And again, a message appears asking him to choose a star. Hyunmoo still couldn't choose. Thinking about the fact that he was in hell, there is no way the stars would give something away for free. He asked them if there was a price he needed to pay. The system explained that the stars raised their kin, and their kin will serve as a proxy for them. Hyunmoo then asked if he had to choose right now. The system explained that choosing a star is a rare opportunity, as he would receive their acknowledgement and continue to succeed in hell. His growth would become much faster if he chose a star. However, Hyunmoo didn't care since there was nothing the stars could give him right now. A prompt appears informing him that the stars are feeling displeased with his arrogance. From the prompt, Hyunmoo concluded that the stars were telling him to watch his mouth. But this irritated him since he was happy that the stars were willing to grant him power just so he would follow them, but they were the ones that came to him. He didn't seek them out. This is his first time hearing about stars, so he couldn't just trust them out of nowhere. Aaron lost interest in Hyunmoo and left. The other stars decided that it would be best to give him more time to think about their offer, and the black veil was lifted. Monstrel stayed behind and awakened a portion of Hyunmoo's abilities. She awakened the legendary skill Domination. She was giving him a pretty big bribe to choose her, but something was strange. If the stars are beings who could give out legendary skills that easily, why couldn't they stop the real world from becoming hell? There definitely would have been someone other than him who caught their eye. If the difficulty was on a scale where high-ranking hunters couldn't stop the real world from becoming hell, then it's possible that the stars were the ones who created hell. It looked like he would have to do more research about the stars. Don't forget to subscribe and like the video. Thanks for watching, the Baka Senpai.